You're listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast with your hosts, Derek Heid and Garrett Lay.
Hello everyone and welcome back to AAF Analyzed. I am your host Derek Heid, alongside me Garrett Lay, and we're getting down right into the training camp of the AAF as it's been going on for about a little over a week right now. Really just want to start talking about training camp, get some major stories out there, give you a little bit more of an introduction to the AAF and why you should watch it.
A whole week of training camp. That is very exciting that we're already that far into it.
Yeah.
And we're slowly but surely approaching February 9th for the big kickoff. So you think we should just start off with like an introduction to the AAF, kind of like what's different from the NFL?
Yeah, definitely. Just go over, I'll give this over to you. Let's go over some little things that, why the AAF's different than the NFL, kind of why it's maybe a little bit more exciting in maybe some people's eyes, and why you should tune in.
Well, thanks, Derek, for giving that over to me. So a couple of the kind of cool rules that I actually really like this one. They're going to take kickoffs out of the game. So there's no longer going to be a kickoff like at the beginning of the game, at halves, and in odd overtimes. So instead, each team's going to get the ball on their own 25-yard line, just like a touchback. And really what Charlie said when he was talking about getting rid of the kickoffs, it's just like it's purely for player safety because they are one of the most dangerous plays. They already took out the running head start that the NFL used to have because people were just getting lit up. And that's just not – we don't want that. That's an unnecessary play. It tends to be one of the least exciting plays unless if you happen to get a kick return. And other than that, there's just really danger involved. There's always a block in the back or holding or something. So I really do agree with this, taking this out. Now, of course, you might ask, what about onside kicks? Because if there's no kickoffs, how can there be onside kicks? Well, I think this is also a really cool addition. They're going to give the ball to the team who wants the ball back, give it to them in a 4th and 10 scenario on their own 35-yard line. So they get one shot to get 10 yards on an offensive play. The defense is, of course, on the field to stop them. And if they get those 10 yards, they get to keep the ball. And if not, the other team gets the ball, which is 35 yards to the goal line. And I think this is another really good decision. I think it makes onside kicks even more exciting because, of course, it's super cool to see your team recover an onside kick. But when most NFL kickers are like 2 for 35 in their career at onside kicks, it's almost never going to happen. So I could see people getting the ball more often, but I also think that it's just going to add another level of excitement to the game. Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Well, if you look at this, the success rate with the NFL on onside kicks this year, if you really look at it as a whole, I only believe there were like 4 successful ones this year. And I remember the broadcasters were constantly bringing that up because without that running start, it's just nearly impossible. So this makes it a lot more possible to happen. And another thing that, along to go with kicks, is whenever you score a touchdown, there's no extra point now, only 2-point conversions, which is interesting because you may look at that and think that kickers are obsolete in the AAF. But if you actually look at some of these teams, like you probably recognize some of these kickers, like Nick Novak is...
Oh, I know Nick Novak.
Exactly. Nick Novak, he's a kicker for the Birmingham Iron, former Chargers kicker, 802 career points. Young-Ho Koo, he was one of the first South Koreans to play in the NFL. He got cut after just 3 games with the Chargers, but he was their starter. He actually beat out the Chargers starter in training camp that year, had a less than ideal regular season, but they're still good kickers, even though there's no extra point or onside kick or kickoffs.
Yeah, and the kicker's job doesn't really, I don't think they'll feel that diminished because field goals are still extremely important, as we as living in Pittsburgh know how important field goals are to a season.
Ooh.
But yeah, they're still going to be out there, of course, to kick field goals and things like that, and they're still going to serve a vital role on the team. Same with punting might be bigger now too. Punters really might be. I feel like in the AAF, I feel like we're going to see a lot of like going forward on 4th down just because of the nature of the league and guys looking to go out there and prove themselves. Mm-hmm. But so another couple rules that differ from the NFL, the play clock's only going to be 30 seconds, which I think is a great call because that 40-second play clock where they can just sit there forever is really boring.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're chewing the clock or whatever and it's taking 40 seconds for them to get up to the line. But on average, most NFL teams are getting to the line in 17 to 20 seconds, so there's really no need for that extra 10 seconds anyway. So I think this is another really good change.
Mm-hmm.
They're also, I think this is one of the most exciting changes, and it's the fact that an outside organization is going to handle the head safety protocol for all the players. So in the NFL, it's all dealt with NFL doctors and things like that, but the AAF has put it out to other sources. And I think this is just better for the league because if the doctors have nothing invested in the league, they're going to really make the best decision for the player's health. And I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Agree with that.
And then other than the rules, I think there's some really new and interesting things that fans should get excited about that the AAF has that the NFL doesn't. First of all, the telecast will feature no television timeouts and 60% fewer commercials, with the league aiming for an approximate real-time game length of 150 minutes, down from just over 180 minutes in the NFL. Nobody has the time to sit down and watch a full NFL game most of the time in this busy 21st century world. So I think even cutting off those 30 minutes is really important for the league, particularly since you're going to be able to stream every single game through their app for free, which is one of my other really exciting points about the game. You don't have to pay for any subscriptions, anything like that. You can either tune in, of course, on CBS for the opening game, CBS Sports for local games, and then, of course, the app where everything's going to be streaming for free. And then the fantasy through the app is also going to be super in-depth. I was reading an article about how they're going to have the players with Fitbit-like trackers on, so they can track every single aspect of the player's game, like their movement on the field. And I know the NFL already has super in-depth stats, but they're going to start integrating those kind of stats into fantasy, which I think is going to add a whole nother dimension to that.
Yeah, it's definitely some really great stuff. I know one of the things that Charlie Ebersol pointed out was with the no TV timeout, there's still going to be commercials, obviously, but they're only going to happen in natural stoppages of play, which I think is very important, and it's just something that kind of keeps the fan engaged. It's not unnecessary stoppage, just easy stuff like that.
Yeah, we want to see fast-paced football. That's what we pay for.
It's what people complain about with the MLB, and now...
Yeah, it's too slow, and this is not going to be slow. There's no way it's going to be slow.
Exactly.
And one other super cool thing that I found was that so these players are making good money, but they aren't making NFL contract money.
No.
But they will be given scholarships for education for each year they play in the league, in addition to what they're referring to as post-football career planning and counseling. So these guys, even if they don't get to move on to the NFL and make that NFL check, they're still going to be given an opportunity to go back to school if they haven't finished college already and get a great education, and they're going to be helped with planning their career after football, which I think is a super important aspect of the sport.
Yeah, definitely. Really great things from Charlie Ebersol and Bill Polian. I think the AAF's going to be fantastic. If we didn't convince you in episode 0 to watch it, I hope we convinced you now. And, of course, if you are still interested, we're going to keep going through training camp now, do a quick breakdown of every team in the league, all 8 of them, major stories. Just want to go over that. As camp begins, each team, they have 75 players looking for 52 final roster spots for week 1. At this point, there is no depth chart, so camp will be spent identifying who will make the roster, who the starters will be. And it's just interesting because since the AAF is an up-and-coming league, there's nothing to go off of. You don't come in with, well, this guy's been our starting quarterback for the past 12 years, so obviously he's making the roster. It's everyone has an equal shot at these spots. Obviously, some quarterbacks are drafted higher than others, but even so, everyone's got a really good chance at making it.
I think that'd be a really cool process to be a part of, like picking a starting quarterback for the very first time.
Exactly. And imagine being one of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate competition there. Like just having to prove yourself, not really based on, of course, they have their college stats, and some of them played in the NFL for a little while, but some of them haven't played for a long time. And so these guys have they've been working on themselves, they've been working on their ability to play QB, and I think it'd just be really cool to get this fresh start. Like no one can judge you off of anything except for what you're doing in training camp right now.
Yep, training camp lasts until January 30th, and rosters are not set at the time being. And due to restrictions from the NFL rosters, the Alliance cannot contact some allocated players, that are planning on playing in the AAF until their season comes to an end, and this does include some playoff teams that are still there, like the Chiefs, Patriots, Rams, and Saints. And so there's some players there that could play in the AAF, can't get contacted yet, but they're planning on playing, basically.
Yeah.
I know a couple Orlando Apollos players have come after. They were like on a practice squad for a couple teams that I forget which team it was, but once they were knocked out of the playoffs, they were able to join the team.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Just like we said last time in episode 0, the AAF is not trying to compete with the NFL. So these guys, if they're on practice squads or things like that, they need to be able to finish. They need to be able to finish their seasons with their teams, and then if they choose to come play in the AAF, then they can do that.
All right, and now let's go over to some of the individual teams, some storylines, things you should look out for. We're going to start it off with the debatably the best team of the bunch, and that would be the Atlanta Legends. They've got seemingly
the best team of the bunch, Derek. We haven't seen anyone play yet.
That's very true, but let's base this solely off of social media. The Atlanta Legends have the most followers on Instagram.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, they're winning it all, aren't they?
I never said they were winning it all.
They've
got the biggest fan base at the time being. Yeah, so just look down from that.
Players to watch for? You want to start there? I say we start there.
Yeah, we'll start there.
So my favorite player right now for the Atlanta Legends is probably Aaron Murray.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, anyone who is a fan of University of Georgia knows him, as he still holds the SEC record for the most touchdown passes with 121. And he served as a backup quarterback in the NFL for the Chiefs, Cardinals, Eagles, and Rams. He was, of course, an absolute monster when playing in college. And I think he really is going to end up being one of the premier arms in the AAF. It seems like out of all of the quarterback situations, the Legends seem to have the most clear choice. I mean, I haven't seen much from training camp about a lot of the other quarterbacks that are trying out there, but it seems like Murray has taken the lead a little bit.
Yeah, Murray also has the SEC career passing yards leader, and he was the second pick in the QB draft, taken only behind Josh Johnson, who, of course, did get some NFL time at the end of the season, and we'll be breaking that down when we get to the fleet. Another player to look out for in the Atlanta Legends, I brought him up a little bit earlier. Young-Ho Koo is the kicker for them, one of the first South Koreans to play in the NFL, cut after just a few games. Promise you he's a really good player. Saw a video on, I believe, Twitter, where the AAF posted him. I think he was kicking like a 45 or 50-yard field goal at training camp. And he was getting all the teams hyped up, and his players were certainly excited to have a kicker like that on their team.
I think there's another player, wide receiver Stephen Hill, and he's just been described by coaches as a freak athlete. And I think that's what a lot of these guys in the AAF are. There are a lot of some really athletic football players coming to the AAF. People who've done track and field before, who have just mad speed. Now, of course, they're working on their football fundamentals, and that's what the AAF is really for. But I think we're going to be able to see a lot of big plays from a lot of players.
Yeah, obviously. And Atlanta, they have probably the biggest story coming out of the AAF so far. Brad Childress stepped away from his role as the head coach of the Atlanta Legends just a couple of days ago as we're recording this. They said that the team was grateful for his leadership, the contribution to building the alliance, and they wish him the best. But before a game ever started, that left Atlanta searching for a head coach. Really an interesting situation. This opportunity led to Kevin Coyle to become the head coach of the Atlanta Legends as they work towards their season opener on February 9th. Might I point out again that Atlanta is the team playing on that major game on CBS, Week 1 against Orlando. So you're going to have a coach that wasn't necessarily the first choice for the Legends coming out there leading this team. So you just kind of hope that the team is believing in him as they did in Childress.
He certainly has the resume to be a head coach. I mean, he's been a defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, and he was a defensive analyst at LSU for the 2018 season and then took this opportunity with the Legends. Brad Childress believes in him, And I think another kind of funny story that came out of the Legends was, for some reason, after Childress stepped down, people also thought that Mike Vick was leaving as their offensive coordinator. And there was like, all of AAF Twitter was absolutely exploding. And just all of a sudden there was another article that was published, and they were like, this is just a rumor. It didn't actually happen. And that was just really weird. I don't know really what happened there, but it was a serious bout of confusion. But he is still the offensive coordinator for the Legends, so that's also super exciting.
Yeah, still a fun thing to look out for. I can't seem to find it at the moment, but I remember around that time when this story was posted, there was a story saying that like Michael Vick is really excited for the Legends, and he can't. There it is. He likes what he sees from his team, and he's ready to get the season underway. And let me tell you, from that story, there didn't really seem like there was any sort of thought going through his mind that he was leaving.
No, not at all.
So good stuff
right, so,
for the Legends.
We can go talk about the Iron now.
Yeah, definitely.
The Birmingham Iron.
We'll stick with
out
the
of
East.
Alabama. Out of Alabama, which, of course, as we know, home to Auburn and the University of Alabama, so an absolute football powerhouse, no doubt about that. And I think definitely one of the most exciting players there is, of course, we know him, we love him from the cover of Madden 13, Trent Richardson.
What a guy.
I think he's one player who has a lot to prove. He's a vet out there on the AAF field because he does have a little bit more extensive NFL playing experience than some of the players out there, so he's really stepping into his role as a leader. But I think he has the potential to be really, really good in the AAF.
Yeah, definitely. He was the number 3 pick for the Browns. He didn't really live up to his expectations in the NFL, but he definitely shined in college. He was a 5-star recruit out of Alabama. And he's if you want to talk about freak athlete, he definitely applied to that.
Another player I'm excited about on the Iron is their quarterback, Luis Perez. He's a former Division II quarterback who's now in the books as one of the best Division II quarterbacks of all time. And he was an undrafted free agent for the Rams who even impressed the great Sean McVay with his work ethic. And he actually made Sean McVay angry sometimes because he would get to like the locker room and the practice facilities even earlier than McVay, which no one really ever did. So he really impressed McVay with his work ethic. And he could very well be one of these players who gets a chance in the AAF and goes on to the NFL to succeed. Because he's Division II, he never really got a chance to shine in the NFL because not many Division II players are drafted. So I think he definitely might be one of the bright young arms to come out of the AAF.
Yeah, you want to talk about arms, though, the Birmingham Iron. They've also got Blake Sims. He was a starter at Alabama in 2014. That was right after A.J. McCarron when they had won back-to-back national championships. And Scott Tolzien, who was he backed up for multiple teams in the NFL. So great arms on that team, and that's one of those situations that we were talking about earlier where there's multiple good quarterbacks, and quite frankly, it's just going to be like, who are you going to choose?
Yeah, I almost guarantee that by the end of this season, we might see different starting quarterbacks than we see at the very beginning, and I'm sure that quarterbacks are going to change hands in the offseason.
Definitely can. And another player I have looking out for, Nick Novak. Mentioned him again. Kicker, formerly played for the Chargers, 802 career points in the NFL. It's a little bit on the older side, but he's more than a serviceable kicker for the Iron.
I want to talk about coaches now for the Iron. We, of course, got their head coach, Tim Lewis, University of Pittsburgh grad. And he played for the Packers for 4 years until his career was cut short by a severe neck injury. He was really, really good at defensive back. And he coached at Texas A&M, and he was the defensive coordinator for the Steelers and the Giants and spent 3 years as a secondary coach in the Falcons and then went on to be the DB coach of the 49ers until they had their complete coaching overhaul. And now he's here, head coach of the Birmingham Iron, and I know he's really excited for this opportunity.
Last thing I just want to say about the Iron is not too much on the AAF's website about him. If you've been watching, a lot, like not too many like major stories. It's kind of like the basic stuff, kind of like get to know the players, and nothing real juicy, I would say, as like the story we had with Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, like the San Diego Fleet right now have like 3 podcasts out about them. I'll be sure to mention them at the end of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pull up a list of all the other AAF podcasts so everyone can get their fill on all their teams and other AAF information. Because at the beginning of this, we all got to stick out for each other as podcasters.
Absolutely.
But the Birmingham Iron just got their first podcast, like maybe a week ago. I don't know if their first episode is out yet or in production right now. But they were one of the last teams to get an actual podcast. So I'm hoping they're definitely going to be a solid squad. I have no doubt about that, particularly with players from Alabama and Auburn coming through there.
I'm sure the podcast will also be a solid squad as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure by the time when the season rolls around, some of these teams have bigger social media presences than others and everything like that. So I'm sure once the season rolls around and there's like games to talk about, and you have the starting rosters out, I'm sure just the AAF website and things are going to explode with info.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's switch gears to our third East team. We'll go over to the Orlando Apollos. You want to start here with a player you're looking out for?
Yeah, well, of course I'm looking out for him. He shares my first name. The Apollos quarterback Garrett Gilbert, the team's first selection, the AAF's protector pick quarterback draft. He was on the Carolina Panthers, but he was waived, I think, last year after the regular season ended.
Mm-hmm. I believe another part of that article was that he was like the last cut of the team the next season.
So he was very close to making the actual squad. He has seen a little bit of NFL action. When I say a little bit, I mean a little bit. He threw 3 passes, completed 2 of them for 31 yards. But we have a quote from him about why he decided to play in the AAF, and he said, "The thing that drew me to this league, number one, was the caliber of coaching. So I knew I was going to come here and get coached well, and that's held true to this point. I was really excited about the opportunity to come in and get some great coaching." So yeah, I think he has the opportunity once again to be a great player. I'm honestly most excited to see how the quarterback situation turns out for every team.
Yeah, definitely. Another one of the players I'm looking out for Orlando, Will Hill, former safety, played for the Ravens, the Giants, a couple other teams. He has 220 career tackles in the NFL, and I believe he's 28 at the moment, so it's not like he's that old. And he's here in the AAF trying to prove his name and get himself back in the league. I think it'll be a good thing. And another thing, you were bringing up the quarterbacks. Garrett Gilbert, he was their first-round pick in the protector pick draft. But despite the QB draft position, Steve Spurrier is still leaving everyone on their toes, saying that all 4 quarterbacks on the roster are still competing for the starting job.
Yeah, and speaking of Spurrier, I really like he's calling their offense that they're running the sun and gun offense.
Yeah, little playing words from his fun and
Apollo. After the Greek god Apollo, for which the team is named. I just think that's fun. I think it shows like the lightheartedness of the AAF. I mean, of course they're going to compete and everything, but I think they're really having a good time out there.
Yeah, Apollo's got a lot of good stuff. I'd say the main story coming out of their training camp is definitely the quarterbacks. A couple of other things that I noticed when I was reading the news on them. The Apollos pass rush has been another big thing for them. Austin Appleby, I hope I pronounced that right. I'm not too, or Appleby. He's one of the 4 quarterbacks vying for the starting position in Orlando, and he said that it's been tough for the quarterbacks against the Apollos pass rush, and he said that if you're not on it, if you're not getting the ball out on time, that they're going to make you pay. And I'd say that's a warning to the other teams in the league.
Absolutely, and I think it's great to have a super competitive defense against these new quarterbacks, because that's what you're going to see from the other teams. So I think it's important that both sides of the ball are bringing their all at training camp to really whip these guys into shape.
Yep, and a little bit of news in the depth chart front. Akeem Hunt, he's a running back for the Apollos. He said the team reporter had said that he's begun to set himself apart from the group of running backs, and it's looking like he might be the starter going into that big game on CBS on the 9th.
One other player I wanted to mention, their top receiver right now looks to be a guy named Frankie Hammond. He was an undrafted free agent for the Chiefs who played on their active roster in 2014, And he's a former high jumper
Another one of
with
those
a
freak
ton of
athletes.
athleticism. Yeah, which I was talking about. That I think these guys are going to bring real big plays to the table. All right, so Memphis Express now.
Last team in the
they
East.
They have a pretty big following here. A couple podcasts out about them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, their quarterback situation is going to be interesting. Troy Cook, and then some really recognizable names in Zach Mettenberger and Christian Hackenberg. I believe he went to Penn State, didn't he, Derek?
He did.
Did he go to Penn State? He did. And Brandon Silvers. Once again, these are like 4 starting quarterback caliber players. So
Yep.
the coaches, of course, I'm sure, are always in the drawing room looking over the stats, looking over film from practice.
Looking over film from college, too.
Yeah, film from college. It's definitely a really intense process up there, and I wish we had a team closer to us so we could head to a training camp and see what's going on with the quarterbacks.
Well, all the training camps are in San Antonio, so wouldn't be too far from PA,
No.
right?
We could bike. We could probably bike.
We could bike. I like it. Another one of the big players from Memphis, Zach Stacy, the running back, formerly of the St. Louis Rams at the time, actually. So funny you can say that again. 2013, he had 1,200 all-purpose yards, 10 touchdowns. I believe he also played another 2 years with the Rams other than that. Really good season before, and I'm sure that he can do it again in the AAF.
And they have a powerhouse at coach. That's what I'd call him, a powerhouse.
Powerhouse.
Mr. Mike Singletary. I'm sure that he's going to bring a great defensive mind to the table. I'm sure their offense will be great too with those quarterbacks, but I'm excited to see that defense play.
I wouldn't doubt it. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a player, and he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. But it's just powerhouse, definitely a good word to use for that. I'd say they got a great man in charge in Memphis. Another one of the small things, I believe there was a scrum that broke out the first day that they put on pads down at the Memphis training camp. And speaking of that powerhouse, Mike Singletary, he made it plain and simple that they're not going to have that. And they got a lot of work to do before week 1.
I know I was looking over some articles, and when they put pads on, people started hitting.
Oh, yeah.
Like hard. I don't know if it was just they wanted to put on a show for the coaches, or if they were just so excited to be back on a football field that they couldn't contain themselves and were just lighting people up. Which, honestly, if I put on pads, I wouldn't blame them. I'd be right out there hitting people if I was, bigger. But I think they're having a lot of fun. And, of course, as long as they're staying safe at training camp, these guys are not afraid to hit. No one from any team.
No, not at all. Definitely another team to keep an eye out for with Mike Singletary as the head coach. Good one. And now let's say we shift over from the east over to the west as we get further away from where we are. I would say, we'll finish up with the fleet. And we'll start with Arizona. So Arizona, I got nothing against the team. Really want to see everyone succeed. But Arizona seems to have the messiest offseason so far.
You gotta expect one messy offseason. They're starting a new league, so
that's true. So there was an article that came out a little while ago from the Arizona Hotshots team reporter. The Arizona doesn't have an offensive coordinator at the moment. I don't believe they've hired one since I wrote this down. Hugh Freeze was originally hired for the position, but he took the head coaching job at Liberty University. So the Hotshots went through their December minicamp without an offensive coordinator. And the head coach, Rick Neuheisel, said that with so much play calling experience and trust among his offensive coaches, he isn't in a rush to name an offensive coordinator, so they're just leaving it vacant. And another thing, a week ago, the Hotshots didn't have a kicker or a punter at the start of training camp. And they were just observing a couple of people and waiting until specialists are needed at camp.
Well, there we go. I mean, like I said, kickers and punters are still going to be very important in the AAF.
Yeah.
They will fill those positions eventually. They're going to have to.
Exactly. Just some interesting stories out there. I'm sure they'll have a complete roster by the time we get to week 1. But just some interesting things to keep an eye out for.
That's really it for the Hotshots. I think we need a little more information on them. I do like their uniforms, though. Speaking of uniforms, I don't know if anyone listening right now has followed the AAF on Instagram or anything, but whoever is taking their photographs is fantastic. They are some of the best photographs of football players I have ever seen.
Arizona,
the lighting
or
and
the
everything
whole league?
is the whole league. The whole league. It's spectacular. The pictures they're taking, unbelievable. I highly recommend you go and just follow them on Instagram because it's a joy. It really is to see a nice bright sun shining through a face mask. There's nothing like it.
The PR people at the AAF definitely know what they're doing.
Oh, they know what they're doing. They're trying to get a new league out there. They have to know what they're doing.
Players to look out for Arizona. Real quickly, Trevor Knight, 6th overall pick of the quarterback draft. It's looking like he should be the starter there. He was the starting quarterback at Oklahoma until he got injured. He got replaced by Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Baker Mayfield. Transferred to Texas A&M, started for them, and he got injured there as well. But the Arizona, a couple articles on him, they seem to like him, and I'm sure that he'll do a fantastic job, assuming he'll be able to stay healthy.
Yeah, so we can go ahead. Keeping in the West here, we'll move on to the Salt Lake Stallions.
The furthest north team.
Very exciting.
Very cold.
Is Salt Lake, is it that cold?
It's that cold.
It's salty. I didn't know it was cold. But Salt Lake, their head coach, Dennis Eckerson, he was selected to the College Football Hall of Fame on Monday, last Monday, and of course he joins his fellow head coaches Mike Singletary and Steve Spurrier. So, just like all of these people involved in the AAF have said, there is absolutely no lack of talent, whether it's on the field or in the coaching position. So just another coach that highlights that. I know Jeff Fisher was actually at one of the camps earlier, the old coach for the Rams, and he was talking about how the AAF is way ahead in terms of preparation. Like, they're ready to go out and play football after it's been like a week and a half of training camp. And he said, like, these players look ready to go.
Yep, definitely. Great stuff coming out of Salt Lake. I definitely keep an eye out for weather, though. I'm just looking at weather.com, looking at the 2-week forecast, and it doesn't look like it gets above 40 there.
That is going to be interesting for most of the teams in the AAF because everyone is south except for them.
Exactly, and Salt Lake does play at an outside stadium.
Yeah, that home field advantage might really come in handy, particularly when it starts to snow, hopefully into late January and early February.
Mm-hmm. So some players to keep a lookout for Salt Lake. Matt Asiata is a running back for the Stallions. Used to start, I believe, for the Vikings whenever Adrian Peterson went down. And he's definitely a formidable back, and I'm sure he can scare some defenses.
I have Kenny Bell down here. He played for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. He was a wide receiver. He played for 53 games, had 22 tutties. And he was drafted by the Bucs in 2015, and then finally released by the Broncos in 2018. But he's looking to make a resurgence in the AAF, and he's already making huge plays at training camp. Another one of those great athletes that I was talking about. Yeah. And I found this really cool story on a cornerback for the Stallions named Keon Willis. He played football in high school and loved it, but he suffered what was supposed to be a career-ending back injury in high school, and it really broke his heart, but he made it his mission to get back on the football field. He ended up running track at Ohio State, but still really missed football and was overjoyed when one day he received news from his doctor that his spine looked fine and he could even take another shot at playing the game he loved. So he sent out 132 letters to NFL teams and executives asking for a chance to get looked at. And I believe he went to a pro day, and that's where he ran into the GM of the Salt Lake Stallions, Randy Mueller. And Randy said, come join us. He's like, we're starting a new league. You're going to get another shot at playing. And he's really pumped for his second shot on the field. So I just thought that was a really cool story. Really embodying that second chance mentality that the AAF is going for.
I like that. All right, let's keep the train moving down to the west, where training camp is at the moment. San Antonio, home of the Commanders.
Coolest names?
Definitely.
I think they have one of the coolest names. Also, pretty great colors as well. And Texas.
Like the red.
I know I talked about Alabama being a big football place, but Texas is Texas. So, and everything's bigger in Texas.
Definitely. And I'd say first controversial thing said out of the AAF came from the general manager of the San Antonio Commanders. But before we get into that, any players you're looking out for in the Commanders?
I do like Marquise Williams, the two-time All-ACC quarterback for the North Carolina Tar Heels. He seems to really have taken over the quarterback battle, and he's super comfortable in the pocket, and he's throwing the ball really well deep. So he looks to be maybe the leading candidate for quarterback there. So I think he's pretty exciting to watch.
Mm-hmm. A couple of running backs, David Cobb, Daryl Richardson. They're not ginormous names, still really great athletes. Looking at Daryl Richardson at the moment, he came out of a small school that probably no one's ever heard of, 252nd pick in the draft, but he still was able to he was on NFL teams from 2012 to 2017, so still had a pretty good career in the NFL despite being from a real small school. And it's funny how we're talking about like these small school guys, because the San Antonio Commanders general manager Daryl Johnson was saying to the San Antonio Commanders team reporter that while some players have come from different colleges across the country, including Toledo, North Carolina, Notre Dame, the state of Texas remains the majority of the roster, and he believes that because of the allocation rules in the AAF, that the Commanders could have one of the top rosters. So he's already out here saying that he's got one of the top teams.
It's a bold statement, but you do. You got to have confidence in your team. He knows what kind of talent he's working with, so I don't blame him for feeling confident.
Yeah, he continued on saying there was, in the allocation process to get their players, there's always been a good discussion on who produces the best talent in the game of football. It's always California and Florida and Texas. So he said we have a little bit of an experience going on with San Diego, San Antonio, and Orlando. So could those be the teams to look out for in a couple months from now?
I could absolutely see them being the powerhouses. I mean, with states as big as California and Texas, you're going to get excellent athletes around every corner. Florida, of course, as well. Great football schools down there. And I just think those three teams are like ones that I'm really watching out for. I think Atlanta is also going to be big. But, of course, we don't make any predictions yet. Yeah, Birmingham. I think they all have the potential to be really
Definitely.
good. I mean, we're talking about something that we have no background.
Mm-hmm.
We have like literally no background. A lot of these guys, if they played in the NFL, it was as backups or on practice squads. So we haven't even seen a lot of these guys and what they can do on the football field at the NFL level. So I just think that's what is making this AAF experiment the most exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's move over to our eighth and final team, San Diego Fleet. Definitely the one easiest to talk about. They had the first pick in the QB draft, took Josh Johnson, a name that most NFL fans have probably heard, played for the Redskins this year due to injuries at the quarterback position to Colt McCoy and Alex Smith, and he ended up winning a job over Mark Sanchez, started in, I believe, 2 or 3 games for the Redskins, and I'd say he did pretty well, actually.
He did. He wasn't half bad at all for not really getting a chance to play. I mean, one of the things that I read, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said the difference between an NFL player and some of these other guys is like 1,500 snaps or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And because they just don't have the playing experience. I mean, I rode the bench 9th grade basketball, and I think maybe it would have helped if I sometimes got in a game, but hey, maybe it's a personal grudge. I don't know. I'm just saying, it's hard for these guys to really showcase their skills and really learn how the game is played if they aren't actually playing the game and instead they're playing on the practice squad. So I think Johnson's one of these guys where he's going to be able to come down to the San Diego Fleet after playing a little bit on the NFL field and getting a taste of that action, and then really show off his stuff on the AAF field.
Yep, you said you were reading an article earlier, said Johnson's most likely going to come back and play for the Fleet. We're still waiting, though. I don't think he's been at training camp yet. And I'm looking at a couple stories here, and some of the writers in D.C. want to see Josh Johnson get re-signed. So maybe the Fleet wouldn't get him at the beginning of the year.
I'm not sure, but I think at least if I was him, I'd probably give it a shot. I mean, I have never played football, so, I don't know what it's like to get hit. And if he could play, right coming out of the season and then going into the AAF. But I think it'd be awesome, particularly for the San Diego Fleet, to get him to play. Another player I'm looking at, of course, Bishop Sankey, played in the NFL, and he actually had a brief knee injury scare, but he's fully healthy, and he looks to be a centerpiece of the Fleet offense. He's definitely going to give other opposing defenses a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. Second-round pick by the Titans. Definitely saw a lot of talent there, so he's definitely going to be able to transfer some of that over to the AAF.
Let's see. Coaches, we got Mike Martz. He was a former head coach of the greatest show on turf when they were the St. Louis Rams. And after the Rams, he was the offensive coordinator for the Lions, 49ers, and Bears. So they certainly have a powerhouse coach there. Longtime NFL quarterback John Kitna played for the Seahawks, Bengals, Lions, and Cowboys. Will be calling plays for the Fleet. So those are two coaches to get excited about as well.
Yep, definitely another one of those really good coaches to look out for. And I'd say the Fleet are one of those really good teams that are coming out.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take this time. I'll shout out, like I said, some of the other podcasts about the AAF, some of them about the teams. I apologize if I miss anyone. There are a lot coming out right now. So, of course, another one kind of like us.
You're all friends of ours.
Yeah, we're all in this together. There's the Alliance Football Podcast. Around the AAF, and then, of course, AAF Analyzed. And then here's the Birmingham Iron one I was talking about, the Iron Legion podcast. They don't have an episode out yet, but I think one's coming soon. There's Express and Goal. That's a Memphis Express podcast. There's the Apollo Audible. That's an Apollos podcast. The Wild Stallions podcast. That's a Stallions podcast, of course. There's the Command Post for the Commanders. Also the War Room for the Commanders. There's Fleet Speak. They are they're a San Diego Fleet one. There's also the Shipyard. That's another San Diego Fleet one. Do you know of anyone else I'm missing? Oh, there's the Crown Loyal podcast. That's for that's for Atlanta. There's the Brig. That's also for San Diego. So there are plenty of podcasts out there if you're looking for information on just a specific team. Or you can keep coming back to us for all your general AAF knowledge, which I would highly recommend.
Absolutely. We encourage you to stay with us throughout the entire season. We'll be doing this sort of thing throughout the entire season from now and through the 10-week season, through the playoffs. Can't wait for football to get started. Then we can have some really great things to talk about. Going to do MVPs for the week. That sort of thing coming up. Playoff predictions coming up in our next episode. We're going over more training camp at the end of the stuff. Going to have depth charts out. We're going to have some really great things to look at. And we just encourage you to stick with us and stay tuned for that.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of info coming out. We're going to get better at doing this. The AAF players are going to get better at playing football. And overall, I think this is going to be a great experience.
Absolutely.
So it's wonderful for you to be here listening to us. And peace out and play football.
Thank you for listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at AAF Analyzed and feel free to contact the show to have your questions featured on a future episode. And don't forget to check out the show on all other platforms such as iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube.